Hi student, it's nice to see you again in this listening class for TOEFL beginner level. My name is Trường Tung. Today we will continue our lesson with another type of questions you will have in your TOEFL test. They are organization questions. Before we start, let's play a small game called Odd One Out. You will have 4 words and you will have to choose which one is different from the others. Here are the first 4 words for you. Linguist, psychology, anthropology, and economics. Which one is different? The answer is linguist, because it's a job. A linguist is someone who studies languages, while psychology, anthropology, and economics are scientific studies. So, how can you call a study of languages? Yes, it's linguistics. Psychology is the study of human mind, and economics is the study of money and trading. And anthropology is the study of relationship between humans and animals. Please take note. There are also your new words. Here are the next 4 words for you. Enrich, imitate, generate, and degradation. Which one is different? The answer is degradations, because it's a noun. Enrich, imitate, and generate are verbs. Enrich, it means to make something better. And how about imitate? Look at this picture, please. What is the boy doing? Yes, he's trying to copy his father. Imitate means to copy or try to be like something. And generate, it means to create or produce something. And degradation is a process by which something is destroyed. Please take note. Okay, continue. Blood cell, onomatopoeia, spleen, and bone marrow. Which one is different? If you can recognize, blood cell, spleen, and bone marrow are all related to our body. So the answer is onomatopoeia. What is an onomatopoeia? Here are some examples. Splash, pop, whisper, clap, and oink. Onomatopoeia are words that imitate the sound they describe. And spleen. Look at this picture. This is where the spleen is in our body. It's a small organ near the stomach. And bone marrow is the soft substance that fills the hollow parts of bones. Please take note. Okay, with this type of questions, what do you need to do? First, you need to recognize the organization of information in a lecture or a conversation. And then you will have to recognize the sequence of information. Which is first, which is next, and which is the last. And then you need to identify the main steps of a process. And last one, you will be able to summarize a process with its main steps. Please take note. And here are some questions you have in your test, in your real test. Why does the professor mention something? Why does the professor discuss something? Or how is the discussion organized, etc. Remember to take notes this. Okay. And here are some pieces of advice for you. First, use the diagrams, arrows, and outline format while taking notes to indicate the organization and relative importance of information. And then, pay attention to the transitions that indicate sequencing of information. For example, now the first step is next, and then so now the last step is or finally. Okay, let's practice. The first topic today is linguistics. Listen.
Chapter 5. 1. Linguistics. Listen to a lecture in a linguistics class. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Yesterday, we started talking about how linguists study etymology, which is the study of the history of words. Today, I want to continue with that discussion by describing some of the ways that etymologists think that new words are formed. One of the most common ways that new words are added to a language is by the borrowing of words from other languages. Now, these borrowed words are called loanwords in linguistics. Loanwords are almost never translated and are pretty much taken directly from a foreign language. Another way that new words are created is through compounding or derivation. These are two different concepts, but we'll discuss them together. Compounding is when two separate words are put together. One example of a compound word is skyscraper. So sky plus scraper equals skyscraper. Derivation, on the other hand, is when prefixes or suffixes are added to a word. An example of a word that was created through derivation is enrich. The prefix "n" has been added to the word rich in this case. Another interesting case is when the origin of a word comes from an invention, like when speakers attempt to imitate sounds with language. If you think back to English class, you'll remember that a word that sort of imitates the sound it is supposed to represent is called onomatopoeia. Click, buzz, and boom are examples of imitative words.
1. How is the discussion organized? 2. Why does the professor mention the subject of the previous lecture? 3. Why does the professor mention the word skyscraper?
Okay, have you got the answer? Question number 1 and number 2. Could you hear this from the recording? Today, I want to continue with that discussion by describing some of the ways that etymologists think that new words are formed. And the answer for number 1 is the professor classified the ways words are added to languages. And how about number 2? Why does the professor mention the subject of the previous lecture? 2. To connect that subject with today's lecture. And number 3. Could you hear this? Compounding is when two separate words are put together. One example of a compound word is skyscraper. So, why does the professor mention the word skyscraper? To give an example of a compound word. Okay, how about the diagram? Have you got the answer? How many ways of creating words? The first one is loan word. It means words borrowed from other languages. The second one is compounding and derivation. It means combinations of words or part of words. And the last one is onomatopoeia and imitations. It means words created to imitate sounds. Okay, let's continue. The second topic is biology.
2. Biology. Listen to a lecture in a biology class. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
This week, we've been talking about the different qualities and functions of blood. Let's see, we talked about the makeup of blood early in the week, then for the last lecture, we focused specifically on the blood of mammals. Everyone okay with that? Well then, for today's lecture, I wanted to talk a little bit about blood production and degradation and the process of it all. The term for the process of generating new blood is called hematopoiesis. That is actually spelled pretty much like it sounds. Hematopoiesis. Okay, so what hematopoiesis entails is the creation of new blood cells. And where might you guess that this takes place? Okay, this is imperative, so make sure to write this down. New blood cells are created in the bone marrow, specifically red bone marrow. The bone marrow, I'm sure you remember, is the tissue located on the inside of bone. Are we all still on the same page so far? Okay. As for the degradation of blood, the next step, most of it takes place in the spleen. Oh, I mean breaking down when I say degradation. There are also special cells in the liver that degrade blood cells. In a healthy person, blood cells are typically replaced in 120-day cycles. Cells are replaced, by the way, to keep the body healthy. We'll go into more depth about that next.
1. How does the professor organize the information about the production of new blood? 2. Why does the professor make a distinction between red bone marrow and regular bone marrow? 3. Why does the professor mention liver cells?
Question number 1. How does the professor organize the information about the production of new blood? Could you hear this from the recording? I wanted to talk a little bit about blood production and degradation and the process of it all. So the answer is B. She describes what the process entails and where it takes place. Question number 2. Why does the professor make a distinction between red bone marrow and regular bone marrow? Look at this. New blood cells are created in the bone marrow, specifically red bone marrow. So the answer is C. To clarify which type is responsible for the production of new blood. And question number 3. Why does the professor mention liver cells? There are also special cells in the liver that degrade blood cells. So the answer is, that's right, A. So include the liver's role in the degradation of blood. How about the diagram? Blood production and degradation. So step 1 is the production and step 2 is the degradation. Step 1, new blood cells produced in bone marrow. And step 2, blood is degraded in spleen and liver. Very good. Okay, let's continue. The third topic today is geology. Let's listen.
3. Zoology. Listen to a lecture in a zoology class. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Well, I hadn't really planned on going over this, but one of the students asked me about it, and, well, I think it's pertinent to a discussion on anthrozoology. Anyway, today's lecture is going to be about the sport called falconry. Since we're talking about the relationships between humans and animals, We'll contrast this discussion with our previous topic of people and dogs. Falconry is a sport that began in Central Asia about, 4,000 years ago. In essence, a person would raise and train a falcon and then use the falcon to hunt. The falcon will hunt for food when its trainer decrees, and it will bring back whatever prey it finds. This correlates closely with how we said that dogs and people hunt together. However, the motivations are where things start to diverge. We discussed how dogs have a bond with people. They want to please their owners. However, falcons don't really bond with owners. In fact, they really only hunt to get a meal, not to please anyone but themselves. We, people, are actually the enemy, naturally. That's probably why falconry isn't really a popular sport, especially for hunting. But some people still do it today, but mostly just because they, like falcons, I suppose.
1. How does the professor organize the lecture? 2. Why does the professor mention the relationship between dogs and people? 3. How does the professor support the idea that falcons do not form bonds with humans?
Let's check together. Question number 1. How does the professor organize the lecture? Could you hear this? Today's lecture is going to be about a sport called falconry, and we'll contrast this discussion with our previous topic of people and dogs. So the answer is C. He compares falconry to another animal-human relationship, and another animal here is the dog. And this piece of information also helps you to answer question number 2. Why does the professor mention the relationship between dogs and people? That's right, to contrast that relationship with another. And another animal here is the falcon. And question number 3. How does the professor support the idea that falcons do not form bonds with humans? Look at this. Falcons don't really bond with owners. In fact, they really only hunt to get a meal. So the answer is A. By mentioning that falcons only hunt for food. And how about the diagram? What is the similarity and the difference between the relationship of human and dogs and falcons? Okay, first, the similarity. Both dogs and falcons have hunting relationship with humans. And the difference is dogs hunt to please the owners, and the falcons have no bonds with humans. They only hunt for food. Okay, the last topic of today is psychology. Let's listen.
4. Psychology. Listen to a discussion in a psychology class. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Now moving on, there's another experiment that was done in 1908 that is also related to learning, but it was trying to prove a slightly different theory. The basic idea here was motivation, how motivation affects performance, or in other words, let me just tell you about the experiment and how it showed that excessive motivation can actually hurt performance rather than help it.
I think I remember hearing about something like this. It was a study done by, Yerkes and
Dodson, yes. So, what they did was put a mouse basically in a maze, where there would be different colored exits, either white or black, in random places. And Yerkes wanted to see how long it would take the mouse to learn to use only one of the exits, and how its learning would be affected by different intensities of motivation. In this case, the motivation was an electric shock. Nothing that would harm the mouse, mind you, just a little shock when it made a mistake, like if you pinch yourself. So the researchers used a few different levels of motivation, of electric shock, to see how the mouse would react to it, to see how it affected the speed with which the mouse learned to pick the correct exit. Any ideas on how the level of motivation, the level of shock, related to the speed of learning?
I'd guess that the highest level of motivation caused the mouse to learn the fastest. Seems obvious.
It all depends, actually. They found that given an undemanding task, higher levels of motivation generally caused the mouse to learn faster. If given a slightly more difficult task, a medium level of shock actually helped the mouse learn the fastest. The higher levels actually started to affect the mouse negatively. With the highest difficulty, the hardest task, the mouse actually learned most easily with lower levels of motivation, electric shock. And to the mice, choosing the right door was, well, kind of hard. When you consider it, it actually makes a lot of sense. If you're stressed out about taking a test, the stress can cloud your mind, and you might not perform very well.
1. How does the professor organize the lecture? Two. How does the professor clarify her point about electric shock? 3. Why does the professor mention taking a test?
Okay, question number 1. How does the professor organize the lecture? Could you hear this? Let me just tell you about the experiment and how it showed that excessive motivation can actually hurt performance rather than help it. So the answer is A. She described an experiment to support a theory. And question number 2. How does the professor clarify her point about electric shock? Here, in this case, the motivation was an electric shock. The answer is C. By comparing it to a recognizable feeling. And question number 3. Why does the professor mention taking a test? Here, if you're stressed out about taking a test, the stress can cloud your mind, and you might not perform very well. It means to support the theory that stress can hinder performance. And how about the experiment and the results? In the experiment, a mouse has to choose the correct door in the maze. If the mouse made the wrong choice, it got an electric shock. And the result is easy task equals high motivation best, medium task equals medium motivation best, and hard task equals low motivation best. Okay, this is your homework. At home, please listen again and finish them. There are 4 of them. Okay, before we call it a day, let's take a look at our vocabulary today. Linguistics, linguist, anthrogeology, enrich, imitate, generate, degradation, onomatopoeia, spleen, bone marrow. Okay, remember to finish your homework in Google Forms too, and remember to finish them before 5 p.m. every Saturday. Okay, thank you for your attention. Goodbye and see you again.